Hello, and welcome to Ficsation, where I talk to my guests about their fiction fixations. I'm Daniel Radford, author, podcast host, and maker of things, and today I'm joined by fellow writer Jan Miklaszewicz. Did I get that right?
You did. Yeah,
I did
nice
it.
effort. Yes, yes, spot on. Well done, man.
Thank you. Today we're going to be discussing The Exorcist, which is a horror novel written by William Peter Blatty and released in 1971. Although chances are most people, I think, probably know it more from the 1973 film adaptation, which Blatty also worked on with director William Friedkin. I also learned recently that there's been a comic adaptation, a radio play, and a stage production of all things, in addition to all the many sequels.
Man, I did not know about the stage play. That would be worth watching, I think.
Yeah, I'm very curious how, I think they could pull that one off pretty well, actually, compared to like a lot of supernatural kind of stuff that they might try and adapt to the stage. Small cast.
Yeah, yeah, you wouldn't need much in there, huh? That's pretty good.
If it ever reappears anywhere or by some miracle comes to Perth, I might have to try and make an episode effort to go see it.
Yeah, yeah, why not, huh?
It was in the West End, so there's that. But if you ever go back to the UK, maybe it'll be around.
I would like to go back to the. I was supposed to be going back to the UK next week, but Iran's blown up, so to speak. I even I had a relative who was supposed to come out, spend 2 weeks with us here, and then I'd go back. I'd accompany her back to England. Luckily, her flight was cancelled before she left England. She got to the Heathrow airport, and they said
Yeah,
no, so she didn't have to spend however many days waiting in Abu Dhabi. So that was something.
that
But
was lucky.
yeah, yeah, really lucky for her.
Well, speaking of horrors in the Middle East, um,
Yeah,
this is, of course, your fixation. So, if you wouldn't mind, would you like to give just for those people out there who are somehow not familiar with The Exorcist, if you want to just give a like little synopsis or summary of the story, and we'll see how things go from there.
okay, I will do my best. This isn't my forte in summarizing anything, but it is the story of a film actress and her daughter. They're staying in a house in Washington while the mother films a movie. And during their time there, the little girl falls under the possession of a demon, and slowly, as the book progresses, becomes more and more under the control of this thing. The mother, being wealthy enough, enlists the help of psychologists, psychiatrists, a lot of medical professionals. Uh, Ultimately, they're unable to determine what's going on. She enlists then the help of a Jesuit priest who's struggling with his own faith. He is also a psychiatrist, and a lot of the book is about him convincing himself, and subsequently then the church, that this girl really is possessed. Meanwhile, the murder happens in the vicinity of the house, and that brings a detective into the picture. And he's investigating this murder that seems to be linked to the house and to the young girl who's being possessed. Things get progressively worse, and the book culminates with an exorcism. And I wouldn't want to spoil the ending, but the way it ends is really really cool. It's not like a long drawn out exorcism like supposedly happens in real life. Those things can take weeks, months, years. But you get this really climactic, exciting ending that ends up leaving things open for books after that, because it becomes something of a franchise.
Yeah, which I mean, I have thoughts on that, but we can get to that after we discuss the first one.
So do I.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
As far as spoilers go, I'll just say spoiler warning in effect from here on out because some of the stuff we're liable to end up talking about is going to be very difficult to do without spoiling the actual story. Maybe you're
Yeah,
better at that than I am, but I frequently run into the problem where I'm like, oh, there's a thing I want to talk about, and I cannot do that without telling you the ending. So
Yeah,
just in
fair
case,
actually. Yeah, we
just in
can.
case.
Yeah,
If you guys haven't seen it and you're listening to this, we'll still be here. The recording won't go anywhere. Go read the book, watch the movie, do both. Catch the
yeah,
stage play. Apparently, that's a thing.
yeah. Why not?
So I might just start before I get into any of the like possible talking points I've got written down. I think maybe I'll just ask you, why do you like this? Because it's, I mean, it's very good, but it's also a very difficult read slash watch in some ways. So I'm curious what about it resonates with you.
Well, I've honestly, I saw the movie. I was reasonably impressed with the movie. The premise of demon possession is quite interesting to me. I'm a horror writer anyway, but I was always intrigued to check out the book. I read the book, I enjoyed it, and I also had the chance of getting it on audio. And the audio is read by is narrated by the writer himself, William Peter Blatty, and it's just so good. I think, and I would suggest to anyone, if you want to approach this book, maybe go for the audio book. I appreciate as a writer the efforts and the build up that the writer goes into. It's not suddenly, oh hey, this girl's demon possessed. He does a lot of the groundwork. He really looks very carefully at how psychiatry and psychology would address what's going on with her. And yeah, and I think I respect the craft that went into making this book, because there are a lot of corners that could have been cut, and people would probably be like, "Oh, hey, yeah, that makes sense," but he doesn't. He doesn't cut any corners, and I think that's what I like about it. I find the leads particularly compelling as well. So yeah, it's just all round a great piece of work.
Yeah, it is. It really is a slow burn.
Yeah,
it does something I really like. Like I would not describe The Exorcist as outright scary. Like it has its moments for sure, but like it's not like every minute there's some horrific thing making you scream in terror. But
yeah,
but it does something that I really like in horror, and that it focuses so much more on just building this constant atmosphere of being just a little off, a little unsettling, unnerving. Something just it just sits with you in the air, and you're waiting for when it all goes horrifically wrong.
yeah. Good point that it doesn't go. Yeah, in fact, the I read or heard somewhere that it wasn't written as a horror. Blatty wrote it as a detective story.
Yeah, I
Um,
read that it was originally set in a court.
oh, I didn't know that. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
which I think that's actually what he repurposed later for Legion.
Okay.
I think,
Well, yeah, that makes sense.
which was The Exorcist 3, not to confuse the matter. It was the direct sequel to the book, and then it was the third movie because there's another one in the middle, which is just it
Something else.
exists.
Yeah, it happened. Um,
But I do agree that I think the temptation when writing horror is often to get to like the meat of it, the big scary thing. But I personally, and I've vouched for this many a time on this on well not this show specifically to be fair, but on the other show definitely, and in articles and things like that. Familiarity is the enemy of fear. The
yeah,
the longer you have your like big evil monster or ghost or demon or slasher or whatever on screen, the less and less scary they become.
I completely agree. This happened with the first my first novella. It's like a haunted house come slasher possession story. And a friend of mine who I talk with my books quite a lot. He's really into horror, and he said, "Do yourself a favor, don't reveal the big bad too early because it will get boring. It will lose its impact. Try and build up to it, and backload the story. Have the sort of closing third of the book where everything really goes wrong." So yeah, I completely agree with you that on the familiarity um, point.
Because you can feel Pazuzu's hand through the entirety of the book, but
Hmm.
you you don't directly meet the demon sort of face to Reagan's face
Yeah.
until I think it's the last third, if not the last like quarter.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing you get is when Karis is she Chris McNeil finally persuades Karis to come to the house. He goes in, he feels a chill atmosphere, and then he goes up and he starts speaking to Reagan, who at that point claims to be the devil himself, isn't it? And you're right, that's a fair way into the book. I think what Blatty does though is he gives a good sense of foreboding through the prologue, right? You get Merrin in most or in Iraq somewhere, and this whole sense that something is coming. Um, I think without that prologue, you might have had a lot more people checking out, wondering when something's actually going to happen.
Like there's a lot of discourse on like in writer circles right now these days about prologues. It pops up
Yeah,
in on especially like writer Twitter. Pops up
it
all the
does.
time.
It does. I
Oh,
see it.
don't write prologues. Should you write prologues? And if you need a reason why you should absolutely write prologues if one feels necessary, just hold up The Exorcist because
Yeah,
that initial opening does so much heavy lifting for selling the idea that something very bad is imminent.
it does, and and you're excited to know when this guy comes in. I mean, if you've got any knowledge of the book, you know that the person in the prologue, Father Merrin, you know that he's going to show up, and that's kind of the excitement of the book, and that keeps you going because you're like, the writer can't possibly introduce this character in the prologue and then that's it. That's just the so you wait for him, and the longer it goes on and the deeper into this possession that this girl falls, you think, come
The whole
on,
time you're asking, like, where is this other guy?
where is he, and then of course when he does come, it's like, yes, brilliant, something, salvation is near, deliverance is coming.
Like when you think about it, it is kind of funny, right? Because it almost when you like step back and look at it, it almost does feel like Karras and Reagan are just collateral damage in Merrin's conflict with Pazuzu because we learn
Yeah,
that he's exercised the same demon before. They have
yeah, in
history.
in Africa, wasn't it? Or
I
was
think
that, did I?
it was somewhere in Africa, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
And then on his archaeological dig, he digs up iconography of Pazuzu and starts seeing these prophetic visions of what's to come. And then you don't see him again for the until again like the last third of the book.
You're right, and I agree with you. They are collateral damage, and that kind of gets addressed. So you have Karis and Merrin outside the bedroom at one point, and Karis is kind of asking why. What's the point of this exorcism? What's the point of this possession? And Merrin touches on that, and he says it's not it's not the person being possessed who's being punished, so to speak. The demon is using that to attack the people around the possessed person, and that kind of ties into what you're saying, that it's this ongoing battle with Merrin. It's Merrin, the demon wants to suffer, and even Reagan's family around her, mother and the housekeeper, etc. They're also collateral in it. I think you're right. I think it's this battle with the priests that's the main point.
I mean, it goes to show though how like malevolent Pazuzu is that it's willing to, cross entire continents, possess this random girl on an entirely different country, wreck the lives of all these people around her, gets multiple people killed, all because eventually that will lead to a confrontation with Merrin and it can go, this is all on you, bud.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah,
That
yeah.
is something uniquely evil about this particular villain almost. You don't see that at all. It's always you get like, oh, you've happened to come into possession of the cursed doll or to live in the cursed house, and this is just unfortunate. It's the intent that marks Pazuzu as specifically evil.
Yeah, yeah, good. Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. That's an excellent point.
It's wild to imagine having that as some powerful demonic entity having that kind of a grudge against just a guy.
Yeah, yeah, and he really does hate Marin as well, huh? He really attacks him for, being aloof and for being sort of intellectual and for being thinking he's better than others and so on. So yeah, yeah, and harboring great resentment from their previous conflict. So
But that's one of the things that makes the characters in The Exorcist so good as well, is that they are all deeply, deeply flawed. Like, the only one who's not is Reagan, and that's by design, I think. I think that she's quite intentionally quite innocent and pure because, one, that makes it more tragic that she's been possessed by Pazuzu in the first place and makes her more of a victim, but
yeah,
also highlights the flaws of all the other characters more, including Pazuzu, because that's an obsessive level of grudge.
that is, and you're right, and I think one of the things I like about it so much is Karis. Karis carries a lot of the story, her, and his alleged abandonment of his mother during her later years and his struggles with his faith, and what's really affecting for me as well is he dreads being approached by other people. He's in the seminary or whatever, and there's a younger priest who is eager and needing Karis's help, and Karis is thinking like, please God, no, just stay away from me. No, no, I don't want this. I don't. But then when confronted, his action is always to help. What his intention or his feeling, he wants to be left to hell alone, doesn't he? But
Understandable.
yeah, understandable. But no matter how strong that gets for him, and then when Detective Kinderman is Karis is exhausted and just wants to sleep, and Kinderman shows up, and Karis never says no to anyone. Okay, and this is a case where his behavior overrides his inner feeling, and and that's really impressive to me. We talk about people being people pleasers and he should do more things for himself and so on, but I think at the heart of this book is the fact that he doesn't do that, and that gets captured again with that conversation with Marin and Karis outside the bedroom at the beginning of the exorcism. And Marin says, when they're talking about faith, Marin says, for the longest time, he said, I really resented my fellow man. I couldn't, I despise my fellow man, and I felt that I wasn't worthy, and I felt, that I was failing God by doing that, until I finally realized that God wouldn't expect you to do something psychologically impossible, and to show love is not through feeling love towards your fellow man, but by acting with love despite not wanting to do it. And I think that runs right the way through it. And this is where we see Karis's eventual actual faith, is that he continues to act in the correct way, even though he doesn't feel it. If does that make Am I making sense?
Yeah, no, I am inclined to agree. Like both on both points that Karras is a very compelling character, and he's kind of built on contradictions almost because he's a psychiatrist and a priest. He's all about both. He has a profession that is all about logic and getting to the root, things like that. It's a soft science, but it's still a science. And to be a psychiatrist, you also have to be a doctor.
It is, and you're right, and in a way, right, that psychiatry, that side of him is shows the conflict between, I suppose, science and belief, huh? Because he's constantly almost believing that this girl's possessed, and then he talks himself out of it, doesn't he? Time and again, rationally.
Yeah, he spends a lot of the story convince or convincing himself that this is a psychiatric thing. It's not a real possession.
Yep.
And eventually come like he comes to the conclusion that all right, I'll do the exorcism, I'll do it. And f for him, it's not just a chance to maybe help Reagan, whether he believes that she's actually possessed or not. He's still unsure at that point. He just, for memory, decides to go along with it because even if it's not real, maybe going through with it will psychosomatically convince her that she's no longer possessed and she'll be okay. For him, it's almost a chance to reckon with his own crisis of faith. It's if this he's sort of telling himself if this works, maybe my faith will be restored.
Y yes. Yeah, that's right. And yeah, because he reasons with himself in the end, even if this exorcism isn't a real thing, then the psychological foundations that it's a suggestive ritual that will help the girl to self heal, um, then yeah, let's go for it. Because you find Merrin even figures out pretty soon that Karis is struggling with believing it all, huh?
Yeah, for memory, Merrin is pretty tuned in
Yes.
to Karis.
Yeah, yeah, from the offset, really.
Merrin to me feels like he's someone who's possibly gone through a lot of this himself already,
Yeah, yeah.
which kind I was like, it kind of makes sense being an archaeologist and a priest because there'd be a lot of contradictory stuff going on there too.
That's right. And, you know, he says that he struggled with his own faith for a long time. You get the feeling just how he's spoken about very briefly before he's actually summoned. There are a couple of a couple of people higher up in the church who are discussing bringing him in. And the way they talk about him is almost like he's some kind of maverick or some kind of black sheep, isn't it? You get the impression somewhere that he's not your run of the mill kind of guy, and almost is a law unto himself, or that's what I felt anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree, and you can get that from his discussions with Karras as well, that he's very much about rather than like the letter of the law when it comes to faith, he's less about whatever is written in this book exactly as written in this book. He's much more about the spirit of it,
Exactly, yeah.
of putting kindness and love out into the world, of just belief being something more intrinsic than just trusting some words on paper. And I think that's very important for helping Karras realize his like come to a conclusion for his own sort of crisis and find his own faith and belief again, because it's a realization that yeah, no, Merrin is right.
Yeah,
This higher power out there probably wouldn't expect the impossible of us because he's the one who set the limits.
yeah, exactly. And so it's all about right action rather than right thought. And and that's kind of comforting in a way, for me, because I don't exactly love my fellow man. It's very easy,
Yeah,
especially if
I've got
you
some critiques.
yeah, especially on the sort of online world. You look at the way people behave, or if you watch the news, I don't very much. It's very easy to fall into that. Oh, people are stupid, people are awful. But then I've noticed that in my daily life, whenever I'm out on the street and working, I generally get on quite well with people. So there is a big difference between that kind of psychological construct you have of your fellow man and in practice when you meet someone. And I think it's good to realize that whatever I'm feeling about people as a general species or group is probably bullshit to some degree, because when I'm faced with people, I actually find they're all right.
Online communication is a wonderful thing, but like with any tool, it's gonna have its downsides and its people who misuse it. And the reality of the internet is it is first and foremost a tool for communication.
Yeah.
And the louder someone talks, the more people are gonna hear it. And unfortunately, people who have bad things to say typically talk very loudly.
Yeah, they do, and the people who have a more nuanced view are usually the quiet ones. It kind of surprises me quite a lot when people get into communication difficulties, especially writers, because I kind of think to myself, hey, you're supposed to be the most skilled at conveying nuance or not coming across as completely black and white in your thinking when you tweet something or you prepare a post. But that doesn't seem to be the case. It's some
Oh, I'm a
writers seem to
terrible
be
communicator, so I won't judge that.
okay, fair enough. Um, and yeah, it's also an ongoing lesson because you often think that what you did communicate was this, and then people react like that, and you think, oh right, do I? It's very easy to say, oh, people don't understand me, but maybe it's a case of could I have done that better? It's one of the reasons I like using Twitter, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's also one of the things I really like about The Exorcist is that message of, you don't have to like people.
Yeah,
If you, I mean, obviously you should very much stand against evil, but if you just dislike people, you can still put kindness out into the world, and that, it is a choice to engage with the world in terms of vitriol or being humane about it, you know?
yeah, and especially in a very direct sense when they're dealing with the possessed girl, because to continue to show her love when she's vomiting in your face and continue to help when she's spewing profanities and this room is ice cold and it stinks and there's just like it's this awakened nightmare that they continue to try to save this girl is I think a great example of that.
It's weirdly hopeful for a book where a lot of people die and there's this poor girl is horrifically possessed. Like when you step back and just really look at the overall message, it's actually weirdly positive and has a lot of faith in humanity.
It is weirdly positive, and another thing maybe we can segue onto is that in parts the book is actually quite funny. Blatty was came from a comedy writing background, and especially with that the sort of sub personality in there of Burke Dennings. Some of the things Dennings says, and if you listen to the
Is
audiobook, the
is he
way
the
that
is he the producer guy, Dennings?
yeah, he's a producer director who dies, and then his death brings the detective Kinderman into the story. And when Blatty does the voice of this Dennings guy in a really sort of snippy, plummy British accent, it's exceptionally funny. Some of the things he says, and that's so discordant and that it's hilarious because you've got this terrible things happening, but then the demon is quite a comedian in some ways.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Say what you will about Pazuzu, but he does have a sense of humor.
Yes, he does. Along with that power, he can be quite funny, quite
But
sarcastic.
it does make sense that the, demon offering all kinds of temptations and all that would be charismatic.
Yes, exactly. You know that it's very easy, if you were writing one of these yourselves to make the thing purely evil or purely repulsive. It has to have there has to be something there, some power of persuasion, some weight of intellect, and you get that right from the beginning, don't you? That there's a powerful intellect involved.
Oh, I mean, he managed to piece all of this together to possess the right random child in the right place just to get mirrors. So the intellect is definitely there. But what gets me about Pazuzu is that the way he communicates, I mean, other than all the weird demonic shit, is very human.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
for sure.
Bloody doesn't lean into the mystique of the possession of the demon. Pazuzu is extremely upfront and, yes, charismatic in a weird way, but very human in the way he talks and communicates and picks at you, where it feels almost like you're looking at a reflection of all of the worst parts of people.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a fair point. Yeah,
But that's one of the things that makes the whole that weirdly positive undertone to everything so compelling is that here is an entity that is all the worst parts of us, and it's combated not through violence or sacrificing Reagan or any number of other things. It's ultimately defeated by taking the burdens onto Karras's self through
Yeah,
kindness and compassion and sacrifice.
yeah, and and made even more compelling, as we've touched on, by the fact that Karras would, sooner fry his own face than do any of this.
Yeah,
You know, he's not like, oh, I'm going to act in the power of God now. He's not up for it at all, is he? And
no.
yet he still does it.
Of all the people you would want running your exorcism, the priest having a massive crisis of faith is probably not your first choice.
Exactly right. The incredibly rational priest who continually talks himself out of the fact that the girl's even possessed. It's a very unlikely hero.
A good example of like putting your hero in the exact worst situation for them to be in.
Exactly, yeah. The wrong guy for the wrong job, even. Um, and again, that all goes to make, and I suppose we're getting into spoiler territory now, but his sacrifice at the end is just stunning, isn't it? When Merrin is there dead, and this demon Pazuzu continues to rant and tease, and you see that sudden moment where Karras loses his shit, and he's like, "Right, that is enough. You're a loser." And he finally confronts Pazuzu, and that is just like spine tingling for me.
Yeah, he like that is the short version, is he basically just turns around to this, demon possessing Regan and basically says you're quite pathetic.
Yeah,
If you're possessing a child, you're like,
yeah,
what is wrong with you?
yeah. You've killed an old man in a way, and yeah, that him finally sort of screwing his courage to the sticking point. He's had enough. What I like as well is that Blatty does quite a lot of work that under the surface to establish that Karras is quite physically powerful, huh? He's athletic, he's tough, he used to box, and so that all leads into when you do get this confrontation, and then you've suddenly got Karras angry, and it says something like his hands like forming into these big fleshy hooks as his whole body kind of uncoils, ready for this final confrontation. It's just super cool. I feel like the writer did a lot of behind the scenes stuff, to get that final setup so good.
Yeah, and I mean it does say a lot, right? Because at this point, the all of Pazuzu's victims have been unsuspecting,
Yep.
or they have been physically weak,
Yeah.
or even mentally, spiritually weak, I suppose, as well, in a lot of ways. So
Yeah.
for when he's in that moment, not only is he becoming spiritually strong because he's found his faith again, but he's because he is also mentally like intelligent. He has a powerful intellect himself, and he is physically strong. It is very
Yeah.
much saying you think you're superior because you're victimizing all these people who are lesser than you. Well, I'm right here, and I'm
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. Come
And
and have a go
it's
if you can.
exactly the sort of thing you get with basically any bully ever.
Yeah.
They don't pick a fight that they think they can't win.
Yeah.
And every ego ever will eventually snap and cave to provocation like that. So it's again all these really human flaws that Karras is taking advantage of to
Mm.
eventually win. And it again carries all of that symbolism of what evil really is and what good really is and how you actually defeat evil. And it's just very cool the way this is all represented. And I don't know if it was on purpose or not. I'm gonna assume yes.
It's hard to know. I mean, Blatty, apparently sort of he wrote it in some kind of cabin in California, I
Yeah,
think.
taking stimulants to get it done in a
Taking
10-month time
taking
limit.
taking stimulants to, yeah, speeding his head off to get it done. But if you think about it, I mean, that's the entire sort of Judeo-Christian message, isn't it? Is persist. And that's kind of what Karras did, didn't he? Through thick and thin, his faith wavering or not, he continued to he persisted. He kept doing what he felt was expected of him. And you can take that two ways. And there are a lot of people who say, that's a corrupted message and is responsible for a lot of ills in our world. And yeah, maybe so. But you can look at it the other way and say, well, yeah, eventually, although we see this final heroic act, that act was prefaced by a lot of self-sacrifice just by doing what you don't want to do, but what you kind of know to be the right thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting take to look at the messages of The Exorcist from a point. Now, I'm not a religious person myself,
Hmm.
but there's a lot of core messages in like the Abrahamic religions that I think are fantastic. And
Yes.
it's always a lot of so many people take the worst parts of these religions and make that their identity whilst ignoring the absolute root core of what they teach.
Yeah.
And I think that The Exorcist, despite all its horrificness, despite all the profanity, despite, arguably playing a little fast and loose with how it represents religion, which personally I think is actually a very honest representation of religion.
Hmm.
The core of what it's saying is so in line with the core of the actual like tenets of Abrahamic religions. The idea
Yeah.
of kindness in the face of evil and self-sacrifice for the greater good. You can't say that it isn't in line with Christian values when that is an entire religion built on self-sacrifice.
Exactly. And yet, I've seen on Twitter, on writer Twitter, certain Christians saying that they've been looked down upon or attacked by their fellow Christians for watching or reading The Exorcist because it glorifies or trivializes or whatever the demonic, and it's like, yeah, I mean, if you want to look at it on a very, very superficial
I,
level,
I mean, I
maybe.
don't think anything in that book glorifies the demonic. I would
Yeah.
agree with trivializers, but that is on purpose. The whole
Yeah.
point is to show how pathetic and weak Pazuzu is in the face of the greater good that is, in this case, true belief.
Yeah, fair. Yeah.
How could you read this book or watch that movie and go, the message there is that demons are great, actually?
Yeah, people will say though, it's making money, it's making I don't honestly, I can't even begin to think how people get that. Um, because I mean, we're talking about it, and it's, as you say, it's a very good representation of the core. That actually the decent, non-rotten part of these religions is kind of there, isn't it?
I think it's a very honest portrayal of religion where it's, the letter of the law, the exact doctrines that they acknowledges, yeah, it's full of contradictions. It's understandable why you would question your faith when
Hmm.
all the people you love have to die. All these good people, innocent people, become victims to horrific experiences, and there's supposed to be some higher power playing puppet master who has control over all this. That doesn't add up. But what does at the beginning, the core of it, the idea of do good, give of yourself unto others for their sake, and everything will be better in the end, is very much in the story, and that's the part of religions that I would hope resonated with people.
Exactly. Yeah. Do good despite feeling like you want to do otherwise. And that is so important because there's a big difference between if you just acted on every impulse you had, then I'm sure all of us would do untold evil in the world, wouldn't we?
We would need way more prisons for one thing.
And I think this is where maybe we get, and I don't want to go too much into the religion, let's stick with the book, but I think this is maybe
In
where,
fairness, it is a book that has a lot to say about the religion, so I think you're good.
true. What you find is because the kind of the Abrahamic approach is that man is essentially evil. Yeah. To some degree, there is a
There is
core of
evil in everybody, yeah.
malice. There is evil in everybody, and people who aren't on board with the religion, and I can completely understand that. It's actually the more rational way to look at it in many ways. We'll look at that and say, oh, it's disrespectful of the human spirit to think that we're all corrupt. Um,
Really, your book says otherwise.
yeah, yeah, so actually, I think going back to this story that it shows that that even though Karis has these contemptible feelings for people, um, that that he's still able to be a force for good. And in fact, there's something even more noble about about recognizing that weakness in yourself and pushing against it. I don't think that anyone who believes that they're good or believes that they have a pure intentioned heart or whatever, I think that is the more dangerous thing than really accepting that we're all a bit crap, and we should do our best to not act on that.
I mean, you see it in the world. All the religious extremists of all kind cause so much destruction in the name of doctrines that profess messages of peace. I would argue that this horror novel about a demonic possession, this very nasty, profane, frequently gross, uncomfortable book, understands faith a lot better than a lot of evangelicals do.
Yeah, yeah, that is a fair point. I will endorse that myself. And I think this is why when you get a book like this, it does deserve more than one read. Especially if you've got audio, it's less effort. You can just listen to this sort of gravel voiced author successfully pull off all these different characters, and and
Yeah, he
because
wrote the
he,
screenplay, wrote the book, and he can voice act. Okay,
yeah,
okay, Mr. Blatty, save some talent for the rest of us, please.
well, that gets into one of this is a tangent now, but that gets into one of my things where the a good narrator doesn't need to change their voice dramatically and be able to do this accent and be able to speak like a woman and speak like a Scotsman and speak like a child. They only got to modulate their voice a little bit, and that a guy with a deep voice can do all of those roles more or less.
In some ways, a guy with a deep voice is actually the perfect person to play Reagan.
Yeah, and oh, dude, his Pazuzu and his Dennings are just so good. And yet, when he does Chris McNeil, you believe that too. It's a wonder. And because he wrote it, he knows where how to deliver each line. He knows where to speed up, slow down, where he wants the gravitas to be. It's fantastic.
Some people are just really good at, regardless of if they're doing accents or voices, or some people are just really good narrators and performers like that. I'm very lucky in that I have had the pleasure of working with a handful of people who are all very, very good at reading out loud, being narrators, being voice actors. The person I do my other show with most does, because I write a story for every fourth episode of that show, and we discuss that one, and he reads it, not me.
Okay, that's cool.
The difference between if I were to read it is night and day. Some people are just fantastic, and that can add a lot to a story. Only if the story's already at least decent,
Yeah,
but
yeah, you can't.
no amount of good performing will save you if your writing is awful. But
As they say, you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear.
that's a that is a really good one.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, it is a fascinating book to look at because there's not a lot of complexity to the prose or anything like that. Everything, all the complexity is in the themes, because even the narrative itself isn't surface level, very complicated. It's the layers and everything are all implicit. It's all between the lines. It's all hidden in the thematics. of the story, and I think
Hmm.
that's very cool.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I'm a fan of that anyway. The way I write, I'm certainly not as far as prose goes. I'm not a bells and whistles kind of guy. I think you can build a cathedral out of matchsticks, right? Um, so I like that, and basically he's competent enough that it doesn't get in the way, and you're able to and then get into the story. And I think that's where maybe a lot of up and coming writers fall down, is realizing that if you get your prose right, then people are not even going to pay attention to it, which is a good thing, right?
Yeah, I agree. I'm also when it I mean, I'm not above the occasional flowery poetic metaphor, sure, but by
Hmm.
and large, I'm a very straightforward writer as well. I think when you're tackling subject matter, especially like the more gritty and real the subject matter is, the more I want to. It feels more authentic to me to use straightforward prose and to just get to the point. And I think if you use too much like purple prose, you get too flowery with stuff, you can end up losing the meaning of what you're trying to say.
Right, yeah, as though the prose is some kind of lens, and when you start with the
Overriding, I
yeah, when you
guess,
start
yeah.
overwriting, then you obscure the reader's view of the story. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I think a lot of people would look at, like would read The Exorcist and go, I mean, the story's cool, but like the actual text, the word choice and all that, it's not incredibly complicated. Normally when I think of what a masterpiece story looks like, I imagine like very complicated poetic writing, and it's like, yeah, but that's why this is so good because it's the brick of writing, sure, not in heft of the
Yeah.
book by any means, just in its bluntness, but it's effective. And
Yeah.
all the complexities are what he builds with that, what is hidden in the layers. Because I mean, you want to talk about unnecessarily flowery metaphors, even a brick is just a billion grains of sand,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
all that complexity is hidden in there.
Yeah. That's nice. Yeah, I like that.
Thank you. Almost
Yeah.
like I do the writing thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good though. And yeah, I personally, those that figurative language and metaphors, the similes, they gain for me all their power by being used selectively. It's very hard to coin a new one, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the problem with that. I think is a lot of the tropey ones, the like ones that are just in the lexicon, get stuck in your head, so you
Yeah,
gravitate towards them.
and they're fine. They're best used if you get your characters using them. Perfect, because that's how we speak now.
Yeah,
It's only if they sort of infiltrate your narrative too much.
yeah. It's one of those things where you like if you start writing like if you drop one every now and then that other people use all the time, it's like okay, fine. It's just in the
Yeah,
lexicon. People expect if every page has some like very cliche simile or metaphor or something like that starts reading very schlocky.
it does, and those things build up quite fast as well. So I'm quite stingy with them myself, just because I don't think they're that
Yeah,
effective.
no, that's very fair. Speaking of books and the quality of books and stories, though, what do you think of the sequels? Because I'll be honest, I have not read any of the sequel books, and I haven't seen all of the movies by any means. I years ago saw The Exorcist. I think I was like 12, 13 when I first saw it. And then not long after, I saw the second movie, which has nothing in common with the books. And I read the first book last year.
I think between us, we've probably covered some of it. Although I think I've only watched one of the movies, and that is a fairly recent one. I started watching one that was a prequel, and I got about halfway through, and I was like, ah. So
Yeah, it's actually they did. There's one that came out like last year toward the end of the year, I think. A new sequel even, which
yeah, I have.
is it has like an older Reagan come back to confront the demon this time. Which I mean, theoretically it could be quite good.
It could, and they did a show. They did a series as well, which was
Yeah,
which was semi decent actually. It wasn't too bad. I didn't watch the second one. I didn't watch the second season. But as far as the movies go, so I'm talking from a place of almost utter ignorance of the movies. All I've heard is that they're not very good. I have read Legion, or listened actually. I've listened to Legion several times. It grows on you, actually. And there's some really good stuff in there. The Legion focuses on some more murders. We still have the main character of Kinderman, detective, and we have the friend of Karis from the first one, Father Dyer, the ginger fellow. I think he's a ginger fellow, is he? Is that how he's described? A redhead, a
Maybe.
sort of a happy redhead chap. He's the one who comes to the first like evening cocktail party that Chris McNeil throws,
Right,
and
right.
they
And
start talking.
that's
Go
where
on.
she gets the idea of the priest, right? Of doing the
Yeah,
exorcism, yeah.
yeah, that's where they have a discussion about the Black Mass, don't they? Because there have been some
Yeah.
desecrations of the church, and it's through Father Dyer that she gets I think a contact with Damien Karras in the end. So he is a character, and he's a nice sort of side character in the first book, and he comes more to the fore in the second book. And it is worth a read, but it doesn't, it's more intellectual, I suppose, and there's real gold in there, but it doesn't have the impact of The Exorcist, or it didn't for me.
I'll have to look at it. I think I haven't seen the third one. Like I watched the second Exorcist again a long time ago, and my thoughts were it kind of just in a lot of ways felt like rehashing the first movie. I will
Yeah,
I will say there is one really good scene where they have this image like they show this sort of it's not an analogy, it's not a metaphor, but it's like they have a scene where they show Pazuzu in the form of like the Reagan Pazuzu, like reaching in to Reagan and like grabbing her heart. And
oh
it was
nice.
yeah, it's a really striking scene, a really good scene in an otherwise fairly mediocre movie.
That's interesting actually, because my last book is Demonic Possession. It's a novella, and I was going down a particular avenue at one point of how I would visually show the demon, how the demons actually makes kind of contact with the possessed. And I was sort of focusing on that image of reaching in somehow and taking. I didn't ultimately go that way, and now hearing that, I'm kind of glad I didn't, because people would have just said, "Oh, you just watched that second movie and punched that." Um, but yeah, it must be quite a striking visual.
It's I mean it's the only part of that movie really that has stuck with me. So I'm curious about having now read the book of the first book. Uh,
Hmm.
I'm I am curious to see what Legion is like because I've heard not good things about the third movie, which is adapted from Legion. I think it brings Karis back, which makes no sense.
It does make sense, but you have to read the book to find out.
Yeah,
I was
okay.
honestly, I was the same. I thought and I still don't think it was a good move. I think it forces the writer to explain it, and there could have been other ways, but it does make sense.
Yeah, it just undercuts the end for me of the first book.
Yep, yep. I get where you're coming from. You have to be away from the first book long enough before you go to the second one, and it is good. I'm not going to speak down on it. It's really good. And it does make and it does end up making sense. But you're in the same position I was in when I heard about the second book and heard that Karis features it in some way. I was like, no way, that's ridiculous. Why? Just why? Um, but I'll give the writer credit. I might not have made that choice, but he does make it work.
I mean, if he can make it work, fair enough. And I mean, he's clearly a very good writer, so I'm sure he can. But it's one of those. a later episode in this season, we're going to be dealing with Jurassic Park, and so we'll have a very similar conversation there, I suspect, because I can't read The Lost World for the same reason.
Okay.
Because it's like your protagonist died in the first book
Yeah.
quite explicitly, and now you've brought him back with what was it, Hemingway, I think said it first. The rumors of my death have been exaggerated. And
Okay.
that's the only justification we get. I'm like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I'll take the movies for that one because he didn't die in the first movie, so it doesn't break its own canon.
Okay. Yeah. That's fair. And you get books. When you get adaptations of books where the first movie is different than the book, and then they make subsequent movies and subsequent books, you get a lot of tangling then, don't you? It happened with Stephen King's Shining and Doctor Sleep.
Yeah, it's I've never I've never read The Shining, but I have seen the movie and I really liked the movie. So I don't know. It's the only I've never heard an author despise a good movie as much as Stephen King hates The Shining.
I get it. The book is good. The book gives you a lot more about Jack Torrance's mindset, and the only problem with the book is it sort of highlights King's sort of tendency to go down blind alleys, or to waffle, or to digress, and that would be, I mean, I think he's got quite nice prose, actually. People call King a bit of a hack, but he does have a problem getting to there or keeping to the point sometimes. It is a good book. I can understand why he was pissed at the movie. However,
That's
it's also a
fair.
very good movie.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to look at anything Kubrick's made and be like, that's terrible.
Yeah,
It's
although if
Kubrick. He
you
doesn't do terrible.
yeah, he doesn't do well. He does terrible things to his own actors, but yeah, not
Well,
certainly
yes.
not to. The final product is usually pretty damn good, huh?
Yeah. And but that's kind of one of the things that I think one of the reasons that the Exorcist movie is so good is because Blatty wrote the screenplay and he was so involved with it.
Yeah, yeah, and he was able to keep to he was able to sort of stay quite faithful to the book, to know what to cut out. I mean, people are always going to be just like caught by those few images, her head spinning round, her
Yeah.
scuttling backwards down the
The flood
stairs,
of
and
pea soup.
yeah, the flood of
Oh
pea soup,
God,
and
that was
and and
awful.
that was awful, and that's fine that people, really. I mean, cinema is a visual medium, isn't it?
Yeah.
But anyone who sort of dug the book, anyone who liked the movie for more than just those few sort of gross out moments, I really do advise you to read the book, because there's so much more in there. There's so much more in the book. You understand Karis with so much more.
Yeah. The book does go into, especially Karras, it does go into his actual mindset and his conflict of faith so much more.
Yes. And not in a way that's actually, for, I mean, I suppose everyone's got a different tolerance. For me, not in a way that's boring or even self-pitying. Um, I didn't feel like he was, I didn't dislike him for his lack of faith. I suppose I got a little annoyed with him, as Chris McNeil herself did, for not committing to it, and for always having a yeah but, as far as like sort of psychological explanations went. There was always, wasn't it? You'd think, and it was frustrating because you'd think he was finally there, and then he would be like, but, and you say, oh Christ, Cars, come on, mate. But in a way, that's kind of the fun of the book,
When
isn't
you
it? It's
think
like,
about it, though, like, is that it's very easy to have that frustration from the outside as the reader looking in. But if you put yourself in that situation, there's no like, I'm sorry, even if you are a religious person, there's no way that you're going to be like, all right, yeah, it's a possession. You're going to think of a million things first.
and yeah, and another thing is, now, I mean, coming to that book now is going to be a hell of a lot different than if you were reading it just after it was released, because in a way, Blatty set the tone, and sort of brought this demonic possession into the consciousness of readers of the culture. Huh? Can you imagine, and now you watch a movie or read a book where a demon's head, the possessed person's head twists around or their body contorts
And you're like,
or
ah,
they
you've seen The
speak in tongues.
Exorcist.
Yeah, or you just accept that, oh, that's what demonic possession looks like. Yeah, of course. But before that became like common knowledge in quotations, then yeah, I can't imagine the impact of that book at the time, when there was nothing coming before it really that made that law accessible to people.
I've not actually heard a lot about the initial response to the book from readers. I mean, it got adapted almost immediately, so it obviously did very well
Hmm.
because, the book came out in 71. For the movie to come out in 73,
Yeah, yeah,
they
fast.
they they had to have been working on that movie in 1972, surely.
Yeah, and it was so impressive, in fact, that and after The Exorcist, that's how we came up with The Omen, wasn't it? They saw what happened with The Exorcist, and they're like, oh yes, please,
And
let's have another.
all these other The Exorcism of movies, because it's like
Yeah, God, it's so crazy.
all unrelated, all with an almost exactly the same title, all with a similar basic idea. Oh, it was inspired by this actual exorcism that happened.
Exactly, and that's why when I wrote my own demonic possession story, I did what I could to not go down that route.
But it
At
would be
first,
hard, I imagine.
it would be hard, but there are things you can focus on, and for me, it was like what the thing that's interesting to me, and it's very clever in his setup. He has Chris McNeil, who's a famous actress and is loaded with money.
Yeah.
Okay, and so she's able to afford and facilitate all this care of her daughter. Huh? Can you imagine that happening to a low-income household of three? In a
Yes,
different
actually, I can,
story.
but it would be a very different experience.
It would, and depending on where they lived, this is one thing that I try to break down in my own writing is there isn't as much help in real life as you might see in a movie or even in a book. Very much you imagine that, but you're on your own. You
Yeah.
know, even finding a church who's going to take you seriously or whatever.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, and you could just and so there, I think there are different avenues that you can take the this sort of exorcism and possession stories. There's still plenty of meat, but a lot of writers have stuck with the formula that that's what works. As a girl, disbelieving family, and yeah, I think it's time to keep kids out of a couple of these exorcism stories. Let's have it happen to someone else.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know too much about the immediate reception of the book, but I do know that the movie had a huge impact. It's one of those ones where you hear about people fainting in theaters
Yeah,
and
faintings and walkouts, and
and
yeah,
people, who bought can't remember the actress's name, the one who played Reagan.
yeah. I don't. I'm shy to
I
that side
I
of things.
I knew it until I tried to say who it was. I'm just gonna look it up. The Exorcist, because credit where it's due. No, not
She,
the novel.
but the girl was, they'd almost sort of scrapped the idea. They couldn't find a
Yeah.
child who they thought would be good enough, or and then she came in. She's not. I don't think she even had a booking. I don't even know
No,
what
no,
sort of
her mother
acting.
just kind of walked in with her. Linda Blair.
Linda Blair. Yeah, I don't even know what sort of acting credentials she had, but
She
she
was
was.
quite new to it. She was very fresh. And
Yeah.
but she received like hate mail and all kinds of stuff because she portrayed it so well and the effects around her was so good that some very stupid people thought she was actually possessed.
Hey, did you read that bit about the effects? They didn't have at the time. They had to refrigerate the bedrooms
Yeah.
set so that the
So they have the breath, yeah.
yeah, so they have the breath. It's
But
very cool.
when you think about that, you think about the response at the time, it's understandable why it's become such a formative building block for so much other horror. And there is
Exactly.
also a good reason why, especially with things like possession stories, why we frequently use children. It's because
The
a
innocence.
victim, it's the loss of innocence, it's the corruption of something pure, and it's because we are hardwired as adult human beings, like biologically, to prioritize the safety of children.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
It's why in my novels largely center around, which are not supernatural. They're not even technically horror, although they have some pretty horrific shit in them. Um, is why my protagonists in those stories are young. You know, in the first book, they're 12 and 13. They're a little bit the ones in the second book are a little bit older. Some of them, one's old, a fair bit older. The others are a little bit younger, and it's because of that response. It's because children are helpless. They are they're in a story, and it sounds terrible. They're the perfect victim.
They are. They are, and depending on which, what type of story you're writing. I mean, we see Stephen King, using this a lot, but there's a knowing and a receptivity to that children have that adults don't, do they?
Yeah, as well.
Children have a different and maybe purer perception of things. So
But I
yeah,
do think it is a bit of a trope at this point to have like the 12 to 14-year-old girl get possessed. It's like we've done this enough. Let's have a like 76-year-old man.
exactly. I think that let's just come back to the Exorcist. Another thing that's cool is that in a lot of parts of the book, Pazuzu and the girl, they're not even the focus of the story, are they? You
No,
get
not at
so
all.
much, you get so much going on around that, and that's the joy of it. And maybe that's where a lot of these sort of copycats have gone wrong is you end up spending half the movie or half the books in the bloody child's bedroom, with various shock effects happening. It's like, oh, okay, what is it going to be this time? Oh, up the wall this time. Oh, great. Oh, puking blood. Oh,
Oh, they're on
fingernails.
the
And
ceiling again.
yeah, up there on the ceiling, get down from there. I'll get the broom on you. And and that's because they've misunderstood that wasn't in some sense the core of the story. It was the people of the effect it had on us.
Now you say that as well. The thing as well is that they're never the perspective character
Yeah.
either, which is why I think it falls flat when they do this, is because they try and center all the story in one location with this possessed child without ever making the possessed child the focus of the story. The reason Exorcist, the Exorcist pulls it off is not just because they're spending all this time away from Regan. It's because even though they're spending time away from her, because she's not the focus of the story, she's a
Hmm.
plot device.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there's so much meat in this book, huh? You could probably talk
It's
about it for.
it's so short, really. Like, I mean, it's longer than one of my books, but it's a short book. You wouldn't think there'd be so much you could go on about. But between that and the movies as well, on top of that, and also all this other stuff, we could probably go on forever. However, we really shouldn't. Um,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
we both are relatively busy people with plenty of other things we need to get done in a day. So I think we can probably leave this one there, unless you have something else to add.
No, no, I think you're absolutely right. We've both got things to do, but I like the fact that we haven't exhausted what we were talking
No, I
about.
mean that's how you know when something's good, when you have to cut it off, because if you don't, you'll still be talking about it in 4 hours.
Yeah, fair,
Yeah.
fair stuff.
For you guys who are listening to this, if you have enjoyed this episode, you can find more of Fixation as well as more of my other show and more of my books, stories, poems, all that other good stuff. Basically everything I do. If you're listening to this somewhere like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can also find all of that on my website, radfordwrites.com. And where can people find you and your work?
Oh, good point. Probably the best way to find me is on Twitter, or what they call X now. Horrible new name, but there we go.
No one
And that
calls it X, don't worry.
no, no, no one does apart from me sometimes if I'm not focused. I don't even know my own tag. Here we are. At heart, HART underscore horrors. Okay, and my actual account name is Hartmouth Horrors. I write horror novellas, and they are set in the fictional town of Hartmouth. So
Oh, it's all a joined universe. That's neat.
yes,
I
yeah.
always love that. Well, I mean, you heard the man. Go find him. Go find his books. Read them. He clearly knows what he's talking about.
Thank you, thank you.
Until then.